Hello, welcome to ProMaker Studios. On today's show, we're going to be exploring the art of electroforming. And that's the process of turning something like this into something like that. And this is a copper vessel that I made from this 3D print. And it's done through a process called electroforming. So we'll get started here today. My name is Dave Krause. I'm an Indigenous artist living in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. And I've been doing copper art and structural art for quite some time. So on today's show, we're not going to get to anything too complicated. We are going to be making some paint. Paint is very important. You need to have a conductive paint in order for the copper to stick to. And it's an electrochemical process. So we're going to make some paint and we will go from there. Now there's all sorts of paint you can get on the market. This is a copper paint. I've had this for a number of years. It's copper metal and acrylic. It's applied through a spray, so you'll need a spray booth. The VOCs are relatively low. It's pretty non-toxic. It leaves, it's really awesome for glass, but it's really specialized and you need specialized equipment. This is a graphite spray, a little bit more resistance than copper, but it's really great on glass in particular. However, you spray it, it uses acetone, and acetone, high VOC, it's very stinky, can't use it inside. So what I came up with, doing some research online and perusing all the various types of electroforming recipes, I came across a 0 VOC recipe, which involves using Modge Podge as a binder and graphite, along with a little bit of water. Now, when you're using graphite, graphite's conductive, but it has a high resistance, which means if you try to send current through it, it's going to slow down and it's going to resist that current. Ideally, in an electroforming process, we want the least amount of resistance so we can coat the part in copper as fast as we can. This is a good compromise for copper paint, graphite paint, and especially nickel paint. Nickel is extremely toxic, and you should have a specialized setup in order to do that. Okay. This is a mask I made this year. It's really large, but the paint we are making today is the same paint I used to make this mask. Hello, my name is Dave Krause, and what I do is I make copper art. I've been doing it for quite some time up here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. And what copper art process I use is called electroforming. And this is an electrochemical process that allows you to transform something like this into something like that. This mask is now metal. It has a nice copper finish. I had a little bit of patina work just for this particular aesthetic. You can use electroforming to transform a 3D object like this pumpkin here and convert it into a piece of copper like this, which I use as a key light. And the process to do this, basically you can put copper on anything, but you require the surface to be conductive. So what we're going to do today is make some conductive paint that will work really well. You need graphite and Modge Podge, matte in particular. Now this recipe has been circulating on the internet for quite some time. It's been adjusted. I like it. I tend to have a little bit of a variation to it, but not much because the principle holds the same. So with graphite, you need some sort of binder to hold it all together. Now with graphite, graphite is a micro particle of graphite powder. It's conductive and has a higher resistance than, say, straight metal. So you can mix graphite with a variety of different types of binding agents. But what you want, basically, you have to think of it like when you put a binder, you have graphite here and here. Okay, this is not working out as well as I thought. Okay, welcome back. So we're going to use graphite, Modge Podge, and some water. Graphite, like these things, they're the little particles, and they float around. They're highly conductive. They have a lot of resistance, unlike copper metal. But basically, they just kind of bumble together. We want them to be close together, so when we apply a current to it, the copper ion comes and sticks to it, and that's how it gets its copper coating. So when we add a binder like this, what it does is it coats these. Now they're completely encapsulated with this coating. What this does is it shrinks as it cures. So now that these graphite particles are coated, as the curing process continues, they're going to go closer and closer together, thereby lowering your resistance. So the trick with this paint is that you need to allow it to cure for at least 24 hours. This will be nearly as effective as this copper acrylic paint, but you won't have the hassle of needing a brush, an airbrush, and it's a tricky paint because it likes to break, but that's for a different episode. Anyway, so we're just going to make some simple paint. I'm going to use this jar just for demonstration purposes. So it's a basic 1-to-1 recipe. 1 part binder, 1 part graphite, that's this stuff, and about a half a part water. It's just to allow it to emulsify, and then you're going to add water to thin it out a bit, so that would depend on your application. Anyway, okay. One of the great things about this is that it's non-toxic. Alright, now I remember why I didn't use these bottles. Now you can pick up graphite, well, it's getting a lot harder to find graphite, but you can usually find it on Amazon or an art store. Okay, Modge Podge. This is just a binder, a glue. You can use wood glue, you can use acrylic. How much of the powder you pack in will be determined by the binder you use. You can go almost 2-to-1 with this ratio, 2 graphite to 1 Mod Podge, but generally 1-to-1 works. I usually go 1+. So heaping tablespoons of graphite and level tablespoons of Modge Podge. So I added 2 tablespoons of graphite and 2 tablespoons of Modge Podge. Oh, you may have noticed that we're actually in a virtual environment. I also do 3D filmmaking, which is why this is in 3D. And I've been experimenting with green screens and virtual environments. I used a replay mod to make the stereoscopic effect. Okay, so we added approximately 2 tablespoons of graphite, 2 tablespoons of binder, which is Modge Podge matte. Say that 10 times really fast. Okay, a little bit of water just to help it out. That's it. And then it's simply a matter of stirring. Now it's going to get, it's kind of really gunky. So this is going to take about 5 minutes of stirring, which is really boring. So I guess I can fill up the time with me talking. So what I did was, these are little cauldrons. They go on here like that. So you can put a tea light inside. We actually have some incense for them. So when you add the incense, you're going to get like little smoke coming out of here. It's going to be really cool. We have these posted on my website. That's promaker.ca. Link in description. So you're going to get a consistency like this. Now it's really thick. We're going to be electroforming these. We're going to turn these into copper. So we want a paint that will not necessarily be too thick. That way you can see the lines. But if it's too thin, then it will break, and you may need to do multiple coats. Just depends on your application. I usually like to do everything in one application if possible. Especially if you're doing a production run. So if you needed to make like 40 or 50 of these things, then you really want to save on your time. So, however, this paint, I have to say, after years of trying different types of formulations and various sprays, this as passive and as high resistance that this type of conductive paint has, it has been by far the most efficient and best paint that I ever used, and it only consists of 3 ingredients: some Modge Podge, some graphite powder, and a little bit of water. I just added a little bit more to thin out. As a little plaque I made. It has my name of my website, promaker.ca. Okay, stirring part complete. We have some nice paint here. Look at that. So, next part, we're going to simply cover this with conductive surface, but before you do that, you need to consider where your anchor points are going to be. When you put this in an electroforming tank, which is basically a big vat of acid, you want to, 1, hold the part, and 2, have a wire going to it so the whole process works. This would be considered the cathode, which has a negative charge, and then the anode has a positive charge, which is copper. So copper dissolves in the acid and turns into little ions, and the little ions go to where the cathode is because it's saying stick to me, and they float and they eventually stick on, usually starting where you put your wire. So wiring is really critical. Often what will happen if the wire is too thin or the wrong type of power setting goes through it, it will simply break and the part won't plate, and you will have really weird sort of looking stuff. So what I do is I incorporate my hanging wire, the wire that I suspend the part, and the cathode wire, which I hook my negative to here. So basically we just wrap some wire around, we give it a nice little wrap, because as we can work with the aesthetic. So your wiring either has to work with your aesthetic or be hidden. So we just simply wrap this wire, which I actually took from an extension cord and stripped the wire and pulled off strands to make this tiny little strand. Wrapped it around here. I'm tied in a knot. There you go. There's one. Now I'm not too overly concerned about the exterior finishing, because I actually remove the PLA when I'm finished, and this is called a I suppose you can call it a lossless casting method. But anyway, you want to attach the wire to your part first. Sometimes you will need to seal it with a little bit of crazy glue on the side, just a little dab, just to hold it, especially on larger structural pieces. So we take a little bit of this. We just add like little points. The CA glue is best because it's available. It helps hold wire to different types of substrates, and depending on how you place it, you need to incorporate into the aesthetic. So anyway, after all that blah blah, we will now paint it. So just grab yourself a brush, put in some of your electroforming paint, graphite paint, and so yeah, we just coat our part. Now with this particular design, I'm only plating the outside, so I don't really care what the inside looks like. It's actually pretty gross, filled with infill. If it's too thick, you can always dip your brush into the water and it will thin out an area, because this is, after all, a glue. It gets sticky, and even just a little bit of water helps soften it up again. Now, when I first made this paint was about 4 or 5 years ago. I had tried various types of binders, and I pretty much gave up to the idea that I would be stuck using commercial products. And now, don't get me wrong, commercial products are great, but often they cost quite a lot. And when you're from a place like Winnipeg, costs can be a very critical factor. So wasn't that hard to figure something out to make a conductive paint. Certainly easy enough to do. So I came across this Modge Podge recipe and go, okay, well, let's give it a shot. And what happened was I had a really good plate, and I was really surprised because it worked in ways that my copper acrylic paint did not. It was a lot thicker, which means I had more control over how it flows. And if you're doing like a structural piece, like say something like this, you want to have good control over your paint. This is a lighter case I made. It's for 18650s. It's made from 3D printed PLA. What I did was I used leaves from my tree, added them onto this component here, electroformed it, and then I put a sealant on it. Works really great, has a very nice aesthetic. And all of these items here, all of this copper was made using this paint for my conductive material. Now, as I continue this, I suppose this series of videos, we'll be exploring more of the why these things work and what you can do with them given the limitations of having a small tank. And those will be explored on different episodes. All right, so if you managed to survive me talking, I've completed it. So what we have here is we transformed this and covered it in the paint we made. Now after 24 hours, this will be dry enough, and we will attach it with wire and stick it in the electroforming tank. Now if you are actually watching, if you check out my YouTube channel, I do have some short videos where I show how this process works. I believe I have a little pumpkin and a skull video which shows how the copper actually grows over this. It's like the coolest thing. So once this dries and cures, that's 24 hours, we're going to stick it in our electroforming tank. We never go over 4.5 volts. That's where we set it. And this will probably be about between half an amp to 1.1 amps. Depends on your formulation and application, but around 1 amp for one of these. So if you have a small 5 amp rectifier, you can probably throw in a batch of 2, maybe 3, and these come out quite well. So they go in the tank, and after about 18 hours, it comes out like this with the wire attached. And all you need to do is simply remove the wire, and now you have a copper vessel which you can add a patina to, or add to different types of creations. If you're adept at removing the PLA layer, go right ahead. I will cover that in a different episode. So to conclude, to transform something like this into something like that is a process called electroforming. And to do that, you need an electroforming tank, but most importantly is you need a material to make things conductive in order to electroform. And today we covered copper acrylic, graphite acetone spray, and this very friendly VOC-wise non-toxic graphite brush paint. Once again, 24 hours of curing time. Stick it in your tank for about 12 to 18 hours. Pull it out, and you should have something like this depending on your tank's chemistry, and then you take it from there. So thanks for stopping by. I will probably have more videos of me making paint. I suppose they're better than me watching paint dry. That was a bad joke. But actually, we're going to be working on masks. Halloween is here. We're going to make this into copper using this paint. Oh, yes. Please support Starving Artists by visiting my website, promaker.ca, and purchasing one of those or any other interesting copper items. Thank you, and until next time, I will see you again.